Thank you, Ashley. First of all, I don't really see myself as an entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is I just see myself as someone that gets to do something she loves every day. But for me to best describe my story to you all is to start from the beginning. And that is with my parents. Both my parents were athletes. And because of that, my brother and I both had, we were very, sorry, I'm very nervous. We had an athletic mindset because of them. We were very driven people, and they taught us to never give up. And I will tell you many reasons why in my story that I never gave up. Another part of my story is my brother. He was 3 years. With him in my life, it taught me to push myself with everything I did. And once again, to never give up. Before I fell in love with baking, I fell in love with soccer. And soccer was my passion. I loved soccer more than anything. It consumed my life. In high school, a typical day with soccer would be waking up at 6 a.m., going to training at 7, and then high school, full day, and then after school I'd do weight training or a training session for that, or yoga, and after that I'd have a practice with one of my league teams, or a game with my league team, or a practice with my SAS team, or the regional team. So, like I said, from the time I woke up in the morning till the time I went to bed, my life was soccer, and I loved being part of a team. Everything revolved around it. I ate, I slept, and I dreamt about soccer. From there, I went to the U of R, and I played for the Cougars. I was very fortunate to go with 5 girls that I have been playing with my whole life, and we all were accepted there and played our first year together. And I gotta backtrack a little bit here, sorry. Soccer didn't always love me back from the moment I started playing. I don't know what it was. Like Ashley said, I am accident prone. Some people called me a Band-Aid, and I would be the first to tell them that is not true. I have been on crutches 14 times and never little bumps and bruises. I have been in an ambulance 4 times, and I've broken my face 3 times. So it didn't always love me back, like I said. My first year university, I didn't go to school for anything other than to play soccer. Now looking back, I would tell people don't do that ever. Go there with a reason. Go there with something you want to do, or take time off. Like, go travel. That's better than going and failing all the classes like I did. Soccer was why I was there. In my second year, I was having the best year as a soccer player. I was the strongest physically I had ever been, and strongest mentally I had ever been. And the way our seasons were set up, we would play 2 games every weekend, and we would flip back and forth where we'd play games in the city, and then we would travel. And it was our 3rd traveling weekend, and we were in Saskatoon. And in Saskatoon, our first game was a great game. Our team came together, we played wonderfully. And the second game was just as amazing. I was lucky enough that from that weekend, I was acknowledged for my play and received the Women's Athlete of the Week at the university. So, like, life was good. I was on fire. But what I'm not telling you is 6 minutes left in the second game, I tore my ACL. So back on crutches, back injured, back rehabbing, and that was not an easy lifestyle to live. Being on crutches that many times, being injured that many times, I never gave up. I persevered every single time, and it wasn't easy, ever. Like, I wanted to give up so many times. And after I found out that I tore my ACL, it was just a different kind of injury. I was finally playing at the level that I wanted to. So you, as a young kid, want to get to this level. As all high school, you try to get to this level of play, and you're finally there. I was devastated. It was my identity. It was everything that consumed my life, and it was gone again. So I did what I do always, and I rehabbed and didn't give up, and I did my best to get back to where I was. When I got knee surgery, I got very, very sick after, and we had no idea why. I lost 20 pounds in about 7 months. I ran a low-grade fever for the last 6 weeks of that 7 months. I'd wake up with clumps of hair in my bed. We never knew why. A lot of things that are still unanswered of that sense. And I remember one night I was in bed in so much pain. I woke my mom up because I was crying all night long, and we thought my appendix burst. So my parents ran me to the hospital, and when we got there, we stayed overnight, and I found out that that's not what it was. And I think it was about a week later, or less than a week, I found out I was diagnosed celiac. So celiac is an autoimmune disease where you can't consume gluten. So that doesn't sound so bad, does it? But 9 years ago, that wasn't a thing like it is now. It wasn't common. It was still scary. The unknown is always scary. So I had to grieve food, is how my mom describes it. I went into this grieving process of not being able to eat anything that I used to eat. My comfort foods were all gone, and it was scary. I don't know how else to describe it. Luckily, my mom went into full-on research mode. And with her research mode, she got all the facts for us. We found out what we can have, what we can't have. We learned how to read labels. And one thing about my parents is I grew up with parents that love to cook. So my whole life, food tasted marvelous. It was delicious. And there was always so much flavor. And then all of a sudden I had to eat rice crackers. So the drastic change was difficult. My mom and I decided that we would start making recipes and making them gluten-free. So we slowly took out the gluten out of the house so that I was safe. And we started making recipes gluten-free. And because I was so sick, I stopped going to university. I just mentally was defeated. So I took a semester off, which then turned into 2 semesters off, and 3 semesters off, and 4 semesters off. I always envied the people that knew what they wanted to do. Now, realizing as an adult, I think that there's more people that didn't know than the people that did. But my close circle was people that did know. They were people that wanted to be accountants and people that wanted to be lawyers. And I always envied someone that knew what they wanted to do, because without soccer, I had no identity. That was all I ever wanted to do. So I worked in an old folks home for about 2 years. I thought, oh, I'm going to try out being a nurse. So I'll put myself in an environment where I'm kind of around things that would be potentially nurse-like. Well, that didn't work at all. And in the evenings, I worked at a bar. For 2 years, I was just there. There's no other way to describe it. I also didn't want to settle, so I didn't want to pick something and then stay with it just because. That just wasn't in my nature. Like, my parents didn't bring me up that way. I wasn't raised in a family that way, and something deep down in my core wouldn't allow me to settle. And one day I received an email, and I received an email from the Culinary Pacific Arts. And the part of the story that I didn't tell you is in my grade 12 year, when I was applying for schools for soccer, I also applied to a culinary school on a whim. I grew up loving food, so I got a newsletter and I applied, and I was accepted. But now, years later, seeing this newsletter, I had a light bulb go off. I could do that. I could go to culinary school. What a great idea. And then it hit me. I'm celiac. I can't go to culinary school. I can't be in an airborne facility where gluten is everywhere. I can't be taught to make the things that they're teaching everyone else to make because I can't taste them. I wasn't sad. Like, these are all just thoughts in my head. I wasn't sad ever thinking about this. I just kept thinking like, oh, this is still a good idea. This is still a good idea. And another light bulb went off. It was more like fire. And I decided I wanted to own my own restaurant someday. And it was from that moment that I never thought twice. I wanted to own my own restaurant. And I wanted it to be somewhere where people that were gluten-free could come and eat, and there's no cross-contamination. It was 100% gluten-free, and everyone was safe to eat, and they felt comfortable. Because going out to eat and getting sick for 3 days straight, running a fever, throwing up, like, that's not fun. That's no way to live. So I thought, I have a niche here. I have something that I can give to people, and I love food. What better way to like show my love than to cook for people and make them feel safe? So I got my business license, and I named my business Serendipity. And it's kind of funny now because the whole premise of tonight is an accidental entrepreneur, and serendipity means an accidental discovery. And it's just the best way to describe my journey of how I got to where I am. So, how do you start a business with no money, no experience, no knowledge in cooking or baking, other than my amazing mom that has taught me lots that I know now? I decided to have a tasting where for 2 nights I would sell tickets and people would come, make reservations, sit down and have a small menu in front of them. And I think it was a soup, a salad, and a dessert. Oh, and an appetizer. And there was 3 options for each one. They came and sat down. I had my friends serve. I spent a bunch of money on aprons that had serendipity across it. Spent hundreds of dollars on plates and glassware. And my parents thought I was crazy, but I was like, no, this is going to work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have my own restaurant. Like, I need all these things, so I'm just going to get them now. So the tasting went wonderfully. And it was a huge confidence booster. Lots of improvements that had to be made along the way, but that's just life. But I decided I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do this. But once again, I had no money. I had no knowledge quite yet, and no one knew about me. And celiac was still quite new. Like I said, in November, that was 9 years ago when I was diagnosed. So I found an old warehouse on Osler Street, and it was a shared kitchen. So rent was cheap, and I decided, I know there's a way there can be cross-contamination here, but I have no other choice. So my wonderful dad came in and he built a bunker inside of this kitchen. So it was walls up to the ceiling with wood, and it had plexiglass windows, so it's like I was in my own little bake shop inside of this random awkward kitchen in this warehouse. And I went and auditioned my food places around the city. A lot of people hadn't heard about me because I was first time talking to people, so it was very hard to get my name out there in the beginning, but I was lucky enough to get a contract with Cafe Drip, which we're still with now. Whew, sorry, I'm talking too fast. And they loved our soups. My grandma's Hungarian potato paprika soup. They absolutely loved it. So we started doing soups with them, and we still do soups with them, which is very cool. And lots of baking. And from there, my clients grew and grew and grew. And 3 years after being at the warehouse kitchen, I was able to move and grow from there. So I moved to where I am now, and I own a bake shop. So I transitioned from a catering business to a bake shop, and we've been there for 3 years in November. And I hope that someday I will own a restaurant. But yeah, that's my story.